Hey everyone, don't forget to go check out Bus and Motorcoach News, where you can get all the up-to-date information and news on what's going on in the bus and motorcoach industry here in the US and Canada. They also have a really cool YouTube segment called Motorcoach Minute, where you can basically get the headlines of all the news about buses and motorcoaches within a minute. Go check them out. Bus and Motorcoach News, I'll put the link down in the description box below. Now for today's episode. Hey, what's going on all you bus nuts, geeks, and enthusiasts out there? Welcome to another episode of Motorcoach World. My name is James. Now, I've been making Motorcoach World videos for over a year now, and I've read and responded to a lot of very interesting comments. Some of them are really sweet and make me feel all warm and fuzzy inside. And some are not so sweet. After all, it is YouTube and trolls will be a-trollin'. But one comment or question I get over and over again from mostly the viewers in Europe is, why are buses in the US or North America so ugly? Here's one I got recently from one of my viewers, Jamie Kerr. Jamie says, I'm always amazed at how ugly North American buses and coaches look compared to what we have here in Scotland.
Why in God's name would you want that bucket of bolts?
Jamie continues to write, the company I work for have Neoplan tour liners and VDL Futras for tour and private hire. We primarily see 50-foot Plaxon Elites for city service, although we are seeing more and more panoramas. Most places use ADL Enviro single and double deckers for local bus routes, although a lot of operators also run the smaller Aptera Solo on tight routes.
And if my grandmother had wheels, she'd be a wagon.
Well, Jamie, I want to say thank you for your comment, and especially that you listed some bus models so that I can have something to compare to. Here's another comment from Dank Dat saying, okay, so I have a question. Why does every American-made coach bus look so damn ugly? And of course, I had to have a little fun with this one, so I responded. So all of the coaches in this picture, referring to the thumbnail of the video that Dank Dat commented on, are either Canadian, Belgium, or Turkish made. None are actually American made. And Dank Dat replies, Motorcoach World, sorry, let me rephrase that. See, for example, take a look at a TEMSA coach and compare one operating in Europe or Turkey with one operating in the US. For some reason, every imported bus in the US is slightly modified, which in my opinion makes them very ugly. Why is that? Different regulations. And also, you'll never see a Setra 515 in the US, and I don't understand why. Dank Dat also writes, the Setra 515, in my opinion, is one of the best coaches ever built. Well, Dank Dat, thank you for your comments as well, and also thanks for the reply, and also thanks for the examples you gave. And you're right, Dank Dat, Setra 515 is a pretty good-looking coach. I don't think I've ever seen a Setra 515 on the streets here in the US, but we do have the Setra S417s, which I've actually driven before, and I know it's an older model compared to the S515 that you mentioned. Other comments are less descriptive, such as this one from Paul, commenting on the video that I made about the Eagle coaches way back in the day. Paul says, the Golden Eagle is a German design for continental trailways by Cosmoher. Yes, Paul, they are. Paul writes, it had a much better and modern look. Many MCI designs are, in my opinion, ugly and looked outdated when they hit the road. Ouch, man.
I'm sorry.
It's all right. It's all right. These things happen.
This one is from David Jones. Looking at this from the other side of the Atlantic, I'm bound to ask why each successive model of Greyhound is more hideous, ugly than the one before. To go from the silver sides and scenic cruisers to models with ugly excrescences, and now to vehicles that seem to be styled after cornflake packets, doesn't look like progress to me. So Paul, cornflake packets, huh? So cornflakes come in boxes here in the US, but you, sir, have made me really curious about what cornflake packets look like in Europe. Because David, based on your words, they look like buses, and that's got me really excited for some European cornflake packets. So can someone send me a picture of what a cornflake packet looks like in Europe? I gotta see this. Okay, so I'm going to read off one more. There's literally hundreds of comments like these, and I won't read all of them in this video today. But this one's a pretty simple one from Arcro. Arcro says, is there a real reason behind the different old-looking style that American buses have compared to any other bus? Well, Arcro, thanks for the comments. And any other bus is a really large bracket there to compare all American buses to. But I understand what you're saying. But with all that said, I mean, you guys see, right? There does seem to be quite a common perspective from all you bus nuts, geeks, and enthusiasts in Europe that really find buses here in North America old looking and outdated. I mean, even our newer ones. So I'm not sure if we're gonna find an answer to this question today, but in today's video, I do want to explore and try to figure out what the real difference is between buses in Europe and the buses in the US, in North America, and why Europeans find buses here in North America so hideous. Well, to start this whole research process, I did a search on Google. What are the main differences between buses in Europe versus North America? I found a really cool Reddit article that really touches primarily on city transit buses and not motor coaches. Now, also keep in mind that most of the differences people are noticing are mainly cosmetic, and I'm not really going to take a deep dive into the technical and mechanical aspects from buses of the two regions of the world in this video. Maybe in a future video, but not this one. In this Reddit article, which by the way, I added the link to it down in the description box below if any of you want to check it out for yourselves, people are saying some of the differences are buses in North America more commonly have two-piece windshields versus the fact that buses in Europe have single-piece windshields. Well, I mean, okay, if you guys can think of a coach bus being used in North America that has a single piece front windshield, let me know down in the description box below. I don't think I've ever seen one. But yes, they are uncommon on city buses here as well. However, the commonly used Nova bus here in the US does have a single piece windshield. It's the only bus here in North America that I can think of that has a single piece windshield. And you know what? I will agree, a single piece windshield does look pretty nice. It gives better visibility for the driver and it just has a cleaner look to it. But on the negative side, it's a lot more expensive to replace if it should ever crack or get a chip in it. And I gotta mention, here in the US, if a crack forms on the windshield on a commercial bus or a truck, it is a DOT violation and the windshield must be replaced. So I'm guessing that's why most buses here in North America have dual windshields. Okay, let's see what else people are saying. Someone listed that wheelchair ramps on US transit buses and North American transit buses are mainly installed at the front door here in the US. Now again, keep in mind, we're talking about city transit buses right now, and in Europe, wheelchair ramps are at the middle or rear door. So yes, although I'm not a transit bus driver, I have seen that most US transit buses have ADA ramps at the front door instead of the rear door. Now, I wasn't aware that most European buses have ramps on the back door or the middle door. This doesn't really affect the way the bus is gonna look, but I mean, wouldn't it be better and easier for the driver of the bus to position the ramp with it being at the front door? I mean, I would also say that in my opinion, it's safer for the wheelchair to enter and exit via the front door rather than the rear. I mean, the driver's right there and has more situational awareness. Okay, moving on. North American buses tend to have only 2 service doors on the single chassis buses and 3 doors on articulated buses, where European buses tend to have 3 doors on the single chassis buses and 4 doors on the articulated buses. Yes, I've noticed that as well. I can see how having more doors would make it easier for the passengers to get on and disembark. On the other hand, having more doors also means having less seats available. Okay, next. Okay, going back to the windows, this guy's saying that in North America, buses tend to have framed passenger windows, whereas in Europe, buses tend to have frameless passenger windows. Yes, very true. I've noticed this as well on transit buses. I mean, back in the day, it was the same with all the North American Motorcoach designs as well. The MCI-D models and early models of the E, as well as early models of the Prevost H345, all had framed windows. Motorcoach trends have adopted frameless windows now. They started in the early 2000s with MCI-D 4505 and the J series coaches coming standard with frameless windows, and yes, it's definitely adds a lot more curb appeal to the bus. As for city transit buses of the US, we are a bit behind on these frameless passenger windows. Now, this guy on Reddit by the name of GR Searchlight does say that frameless windows are offered by most US bus manufacturers. We're talking about city transit buses again, by the way. GR Searchlight says they generally cost a lot more to order, which is why a lot of US and Canadian transit agencies, especially those that are underfunded, avoid them. Which, I mean, makes a lot of sense. Now, I will say that in the town I live in here in the US, Urbana, Illinois, the newer Excelsior hybrid drive city buses we got do have the frameless windows. I mean, this is the first time I've ever seen frameless windows on the side of a city bus, but we finally got them. Some other differences I've noticed personally is that North American buses, mostly city transit buses, tend to have longer wheelbases and less front and rear overhangs in comparison to transit buses in Europe. Now, this is true in some Motorcoach designs as well, but not significant. My theory on this is that in most European cities, the streets are predominantly narrower and smaller because most of the cities in Europe are much older than US cities. And because of that, my theory is that buses in Europe require tighter turn radiuses in order to be able to navigate some of these smaller roads, so that's why they have more rear and front overhangs. Now, I mentioned this in one of my older videos I made. This is not just my theory. I've actually read several articles that point to this being the reason why buses in Europe have shorter wheelbases. But with that said, I've also gotten many people in the comments section that disagree. So feel free to let us know if you disagree with this and give us your 2 cents, or would that be euros? Okay, so we've listed out some of the differences between European buses and North American buses, but are we any closer to figuring out if buses in North America are really less appealing than European buses? I don't think so. So what is it about a bus that makes them look good? Well, let's take a look at some of the buses that the viewers I mentioned earlier on listed in their comments and compare them to the latest, newest North American bus models. Now, Jamie Kerr mentioned in his comments, the company I work for have Neoplan Tourliners, VDL Futuras for tour and private hire. So I would say it's fair that these are basically motor coaches. Jamie also mentions we primarily see 50-foot Plaxon Elites for city service, although we're seeing more and more panoramas. Okay, so using these, let's compare them to buses here in North America. The latest and greatest in Motorcoach design here in North America today are coach buses like the MCI J4500, the Prevost H345. Now, both of these companies are headquartered in Canada, I believe. So if we pick a motor coach that Jamie mentioned, like let's say the VDL Futura, let's say, and compare it to a MCI J4500, what can we say is really that different for Europeans to think that it's so much more prettier than MCIs and Prevosts? Well, the first thing I noticed looking at this picture right here is how much more curved the corners are on the European buses. And of course, the VDL Futura has a single piece windshield. Now, the MCI J4500 to me seems a lot wider and bulkier than the VDL Futuras. Now let's take that Neoplan Tourliner from Europe and put it next to a North American Prevost H345. So now with these two pictures next to each other, the one thing I can say is that European bus designs tend to add a lot more sporty angles and curves to their bus bodies. Again, there's definitely more front and rear overhang on the European coach buses compared to the North American buses. And again, the Neoplan has the single piece windshield. To me, North American buses, again, look more bulky, boxy, but also North American buses, to me, look more rugged and solid. But wait, what about those buses in the US that are built in Europe or other countries like the Van Hool CX45 and the TEMSA TS45, as well as the Irizar, which are built in Spain? So let's go back to the comment made by Dankdat when he replied to me saying, take a look at a TEMSA coach and compare one operating in Europe or Turkey with one operating in the US. For some reason, every imported bus in the US and North America is slightly modified, which in my opinion makes them very ugly. Why is that? Different regulations? Okay, so let's actually answer this comment. Let's take a look at the TEMSA TS45, which is the 45-foot version TEMSA model that is currently being exported to the US and compare it to that of a TEMSA model that's being used in Europe. Now, according to Wikipedia, there are several of these models, so let's just choose one. Let's say the TEMSA Safari Plus. I've never heard of these before. So putting these two pictures next to each other, I mean, right off the bat, the obvious difference is that the North American TEMSA TS45 seems boxier. Of course, it has dual front windshields and not as much of a front overhang in comparison to the TEMSA Safari. Also, I mean, it's pretty obvious that the North American TS45 has a tag axle and seems to be longer than this TEMSA Safari. So, okay, the difference is pretty apparent. European coach designs tend to make their coach bodies more sports car-like. Now, I will say that North American coach designs are starting to catch up to this trend, but all I can say is North American coaches do seem boxier when you put them next to a European bus. Now, DankDat did ask the question of why TEMSA would make a special version of bus just for export to North America. Why not just send the tried and true designs already being used in Turkey and other European countries over to the US for use? Now, another company that does this is Van Hool. I mean, if you look at their Wikipedia page, they make all kinds of different models of coach buses for the European market, but offers a completely different lineup for North America. Also, much fewer choices in that North American lineup as well. So, why do coach bus manufacturers do this? Well, part of it is to conform to local regulations. I mean, when it comes to commercial trucks and passenger carrying buses, countries like the United States and Canada do require a certain list of criteria to be met on a vehicle traveling on the roads here. Things like emission ratings, crash safety standards, even down to wheel and tire size and quantity. But why the boxier body? I mean, I'm sure that US and Canada doesn't have a rule that buses have to conform to a certain amount of boxiness. Or maybe they do?
Well, the thing's got to have a tailpipe.
Now, I couldn't actually find an answer to this question. But maybe the designers and engineers over in Turkey and Belgium purposely make the bodies boxier to appeal to North American tastes? I mean, I don't know. Another reason I thought of is passenger capacity, maybe. In the US, people like their space. Now, I'm not sure what the standard passenger capacity of a full-size motor coach is in Europe, but in the US, the standard passenger capacity on a full-size single-deck coach bus is between 56 to 60 passengers. Most coach buses here in the US also lack the midship door as well as the midship restroom. Although they do exist here, I'm sure it's available as an option, but Americans also tend to travel heavier, which means more emphasis on luggage space. And putting a midship door and restroom on a coach means removing an entire luggage bay compartment. Now, folks, after all this, I still don't know what it is that we've really established. Although I did have fun comparing the buses of these two parts of the world together so far. Buses in North America definitely have less curves and simpler lines as far as body design. Buses in North America also tend to be a bit wider than European buses, and I think US and North American coaches make more use of internal headroom. And because of that, the body comes out a bit bulkier and boxier looking. But you know what? I personally find North American buses more pleasant to look at. I mean, don't get me wrong, I appreciate the sports car futuristic look of buses and motor coaches in Europe. I find them elegant and definitely more stylish than that of the buses of North America. North American buses are definitely more basic, but yet I find them more practical. And what is practicality other than the understanding of one's needs? So in the end, I guess it's all about the environment each design evolves in. North American coaches look the way they do partially out of necessity, the need for more interior space, the need to look more durable rather than more of a race car. Also, to all the European viewers who are watching this, I am totally biased. I mean, I grew up with buses in the US, so I'm more used to them and the way they look. Now, I don't find European buses ugly. I find them interesting to look at, perhaps as one would find one of those models walking down the runway with some new fashion or design that's not mainstream yet. But North American buses are more comforting to look at for me. They remind me of what's familiar, and in the end, that's what really appeals to all of us. So maybe that's why people in Europe find North American buses more ugly. They're just simply not as familiar to them as they are for us. So please, I want to hear what you have to say about the bus designs of these two parts of the world. Now, if you have any additional info on the actual differences between these two designs of buses, please feel free to put them down in the comments below. Share them with all of us. I'm really looking forward to reading the comments section for this video. If you're watching this, then you are part of the Motorcoach world.